Words.
Starting streaming, saying things to the beginning of the
Words.
stream at words. Everybody words. See, it does this thing where it gives me like a blank screen at first. So let's unmute for a second and see if other people's words were. Unmute for a second and see if other people's words were.
Do other
Mute for a
people's
second and
words
see
work?
if other people's words were.
Do other
Mute for a
people's-
second. Cool. Yeah.
Word.
All right.
For everybody who wants to hear.
Yep.
Words. We have words. We have words off. So fully like caveat emptor with this stream, everybody. The caveat emptor being that God has sent a storm to descend upon Spokane, so it might flood. I might be struck down by lightning for my blasphemy, but I'm still gonna say that my religion is to the Sonic franchise. So if that must be blasphemy, then he can strike me dead. But the storm also might, instead of striking me dead, just strike down my internet or whatever. So if this goes down, it's because I was too fast. So with that being said, everybody here is here for more here and words. We are saying words about paleo strategy and discussing like the pitfalls thereof. We've got like everybody here has been on the channel before. I tried to get like a whole lot of like interest in this particular, but normally we stream on Sunday, and tomorrow is Father's Day, and people who aren't fatherless will be able to go celebrate that. So with that being said, happy Father's Day to the dads out there who aren't fascist, and we'll be getting going relatively soon talking about paleo shit. Real quick, I'll start with Chris, who hasn't been on the channel in a bit. You are in Argentina, saying words to those people. How's that been going, and what's been going on where it's going at?
Well, there was a conference that had a lot of people in the liberty movement from South America, including Milei himself and some of his ministers. It was in Buenos Aires. I decided to visit Cordoba for a few days. It's winter down here, but so it's a little cooler and we have shorter days, but it's definitely an interesting place to visit, and I'll be heading back to the States soon. I have a YouTube show called Fountainhead Forum. I've done about 180 shows. I've done 45 shows about Milei, and I've covered other topics, whether it be crypto, red pill stuff, anarchists, and liberty all over the world. So, but also occasionally, stuff like raising good kids. But it's been a blast. So thank you. And I'm on Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, and BitChute right now. So that's the Fountainhead Forum. So yes, that's where I am.
Quail.
And we're ahead of New York here. So it's past 10 o'clock here.
Yeah. Bigfoot.
Hey everyone, I'm Bigfoot, also known as the Anarcho-Appalachian. I am your local friendly neighborhood cryptid who hates the government and has written one article on Panarch Unity that you can read today. And that's pretty much it for me.
Iconoclasm. You can find out things about that. Feel free to click the Anarch Unity in your browser by typing that into it, because I don't have that in my default description yet, even though I should. Bryce.
Hey, I'm Bryce, the usual Wisconsinite here. I'm the Congressional District 3 rep for our executive committee on the state party, member of the Mises Caucus, and now I am a state organizer for the Mises Caucus as well, so beautiful.
I knew you'd inevitably join us.
And we've got Rose as well.
Yep, I'm Rose. You all know me by now. Anarchist without adjectives, part-time big L libertarian. I am a LPNY state committee, Mises Caucus state organizer, and a member of the National Platform Committee.
All right.
Also was a delegate at the National.
Yeah, so briefly, because we can lead up into this and it'll give people time to get in here, briefly, the convention, because we've gone over some of that, like recently, but y'all went to the convention and Chris Baker was there, and like it's gone somewhat sideways since, if I do say so myself, and 3 states have now disavowed Chase Oliver, mostly off bullshit that people made up, in my humble estimation, and also off of their lack of ability to get a more marketable candidate for their positions, because their positions are dog shit and they're not very marketable. That's why, like, recently, there was an episode of Timcast where Tim Pool was talking with like Karen Ann Harlow's, Mike Rechtenwald, and fucking Clint Russell wasn't there, and Jeremy Kaufman, and they were trying to get Chase Oliver on, but he had literal legal obligations. Chris, you say you've got some insight into that.
Yeah, Chase had to be in New Hampshire on Friday to file ballot access paperwork, because there is a drive, mostly led by Justin O'Donnell, to get Chase on the ballot. They need to get 5,000 signatures, and Justin has wisely combined his efforts with getting a gubernatorial on that candidate on the ballot as well. So, you just go out and get 2 people to sign one petition, or get one person to sign 2 petitions at the same time. So it's a smart move on Justin's part, and so it wasn't like you could reschedule this. I don't know the nature of the communications, but it some people think that maybe they picked this date on purpose, but you can't really reschedule those meetings with the government, unfortunately. At least you don't want to take a risk on that. So that was,
yeah, because
so Chase was in New Hampshire for that reason. Yeah,
because like if I were to be a cynical conspiracy theorist, which I'm never that. I'm always an optimistic, white-pilled. So if I were to be a cynical conspiracy theorist, I would say that Jeremy Kaufman, a fascist from New Hampshire, wanted to use this sort of external pressure to get him moved away from the place that he needed to be in order to get into New Hampshire. And either way, whether you damage him by removing his ballot access in a state, or whether you damage him by damaging his reputation and making him seem like one of those leftist infiltrators who won't debate, you still damage him in one way or another. So if you wanted to make a conspiracy where far-right figures are trying to appear like they're the reasonable ones, but really what they're doing is using that reasonability as leverage to blackmail people into giving up something that you falsely believed that you illegitimately lost, it wouldn't look any different to this.
I did wonder if they deliberately hosted it at a time when he couldn't make it, or gave him short notice or whatever.
Gonna say.
You've got to do. I mean, when you're doing something like this, you got to schedule things probably weeks ahead. You got to reschedule plane tickets and airfare changes and all stuff like that. I mean, you don't want to cancel on people, and then you're flaking on them, and you might be, you're also disrespecting the people who went out and got petitions for you. It's so what you put Chase in a bad position. It's I hope something can work out here, but it's hard to say really. And the weird thing about all this is, I don't have kids, but if I was looking for a sitter, I would probably trust my kids with Chase Oliver before I would trust them with Jeremy Kaufman.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and funnily enough, when people talk about kid safety around Chase Oliver, one of the reasons that LPNH was fucking like bringing up drag shows in their fucking tantrum letter where they said we're not going to endorse him, one of the reasons that they were bringing that up is because he asked publicly like if a RuPaul drag race event was fucking friendly for kids, whether it was like 18 plus or whether it was like kid friendly. And because
in 2019 too. It was
Yeah.
like years ago.
And because he asked that, like a reasonable question, is this like just for adults? Meaning, is there going to be erotic bullshit? Is there going to be stripping? Is there going to be whatever? Because he asked something that a parent should ask before taking their kid to pretty much any event, he got accused of supporting children at drag shows, and like they all go to the worst possible examples of that, as though RuPaul with massive corporate backing would be exactly the same as like some kid being taken to a strip club or some shit. It's just fucking evil. It's fucking evil, like what they're doing. So I thought I would start the stream off with that, because Chris has not been here for the others, so I thought it'd be good for him to, you know, say some of that shit, like in this regard. Also, because I think an example of the paleo strategy is being at play where you are, I think it's an interesting thing that we might bring up at some point, have like a fuller stream on the Javier Milei situation, because it's gotten, in my opinion, worse. So, like, there's plenty to potentially discuss. So let me know if you're interested in that at some point. We'll sort of tease that for the audience. But the general vibe is that we're going over the paleo planks, and we're going to go over various things that were the result of the paleo planks, not the least of which is, you know, tyranny. So, like, we've already gone over the first several planks, and we'll be going over more tonight. This one will probably be a less than 2-hour stream, but it will be, I think, a good one. So, with all that being said, the general gist of like the previous streams were, there are some things that are understandable about this strategy, but in general it's just massive evil wrapped in fucking bullshit. So with that being said, the initial fucking like sort of plank that I think we can all agree to is that we need to slash taxes. We all agree with that, because like the paleo strategy, and you're familiar with it from the messages that I saw, Chris. You're familiar with it. So like basically the paleo strategy, for anybody who doesn't know, is Rothbard trying to get paleocons on board with libertarianism. And in that regard, basically making a bunch of ethical compromises with these conservatives, and platforming a sort of strategy for what he called right-wing populism. And so, with all that being said, Chris, you were not here for the other ones. The taxation plank was already gone over. We pretty much like all agree on reducing taxation, slashing them, and getting rid of them and if we can't get rid of them, at least getting them massively cut. So 2, and like your response will be responded to. Slash welfare. Get rid of underclass rule by abolishing the welfare system, or short of abolition, severely cutting and restricting it. He said we are ruled by the underclass. How insane is that? That's my question.
Yeah, I don't think we're ruled by the underclass. You know, it's funny, this whole paleo stuff started in early 1990, which was right after the Berlin Wall came down. So I think there was this maybe belief that, we can go back to being the old right, you know, that they would talk about, of, you know, people like John Flynn and, you know, the earlier Taft, you know, the old right that existed before before World War II. And then, of course, I think it was doomed to fail as soon as Iraq invaded Kuwait, and that was when conservatives said, "Oh, we're going to be interventionist," even though the evil empire is now gone. So I don't know I don't know why, and they seem to be just attaching to something in the past. And you can't recreate a movement no matter what it is. Recreating old movements just doesn't work. Because Rothbard was actually on the staff of Liberty magazine when it started, and then he broke with Liberty, and Lou Rockwell wrote this thing about, in defense of paleo libertarianism. And I remember Tim Virgila, when I was at Liberty magazine, said, "Oh, Rockwell hates us." I mean, Bill tried to have a magazine that was really, Bill Bradford, the publisher, tried to have a magazine that did not take sides in the faction wars. And the Mises Institute didn't touch us at all back then. We certainly considered Cato and Reason more libertarian than Mises in the 90s. Then the World Trade Center happened, and then COVID happened, and this is where we are now. So it's been kind of weird to watch it happen. But yeah, that's the whole history of the paleo stuff.
Well,
in my view,
in terms of Reason and Cato, I think they were fundamentally compromised by. And this will come to zero people who have heard me repeat myself ad nauseum, fucking being annoying about this subject. But Koch funding and fascism, and the fact that the Koch family money was directly descended from Nazi money, literally helping Adolf Hitler qua Fred Koch. And so when that becomes your bedrock foundation, suddenly you have a movement that is fundamentally compromised toward helping rich authoritarian right-wingers. And additionally, because we're talking the paleo strategy, and eventually Rothbard, and I will quote him in a bit, started caping for George H.W. Bush, I will also say that when he started, I have quotes. You'll but I'll bring those up after I get your impression of number 3, because number 3 is something that I fucking hate, and it also leads nicely into number 4, which is where we'll sort of be getting the baseline from people who weren't here for the last one, which we also went over for. But basically, he started to praise George H.W. Bush and say, well, if it's a choice between him and Clinton, we should go with Bush, obviously. And I'll quote him here shortly once I bring up my fucking shit. Admittedly, today has been a day of weird schedule bullshit and caffeine, and my brain's a little bit haywire. But the general gist is that it's the same vibe now. If it's a choice between Biden and Trump, obviously Trump. So when it comes to that mentality, for me, for my money, I'm all about fucking recognizing the same trends over and over and over. And Prescott Bush also helped the Nazis, and his family fortune came down the Bush dynasty through support of right-wing authoritarian governments, while George H.W. Bush worked with the CIA, which was also helping Nazis escape Germany. And a bunch of Nazi bullshit is just constantly infiltrating these right-wing supporting organizations and their affiliates, and it just seems like, maybe there's a Nazi problem. But that's me being a conspiracy theorist. I'm gonna shut the fuck up, and you can talk about underclass rule for a second before I bring up 3.
Well, we definitely don't have underclass rule. I think that's kind of ridiculous. I mean, considering how much we've created an underclass, I mean, things are getting worse off for a lot of Americans. I mean, having seen what's happened in my home state of West Virginia, where a state whose population has went down since 1940, if they're ruling, they're certainly not ruling very well. I think that's baloney. That's I don't necessarily think that being descendants of somebody means you're evil. I mean, neither of my parents was libertarian, so that doesn't necessarily mean I can't be a libertarian. So
Sure. My point in bringing up the heritage of the money is only that if that's what your dynasty is protecting, then it's probably it stands to reason that that's why the only organizations you'll support are going to be authoritarian right wing, and no, like they weren't out here supporting commies. They weren't out here like backing like the Che Guevaras of the world. They were out here backing like Pinochet and shit, and like, you know, all these fucking like authoritarian right wing dictators around the world. And so it's no surprise to me that the people who descended from that, like the Cato funding itself, which was based on the Koch Institute to begin with, which is what it was originally called before they kicked out Rothbard, would also sort of cuck and cater to right-wing authoritarianism in, you know, the modern day post 9/11. So,
well, okay, Cato Institute has been infiltrating not just all libertarian and conservative organizations for a long time.
yes.
Like anything that might be anti-status quo, they've been infiltrating and giving funding to and pushing them in a particular direction. That direction is a very watered down, establishment friendly, neutered version of what their ideology actually was. So fast forward to, you know, right now, and you have outlets like Cato and Reason trying to convince people who have just gotten into libertarianism that things like corporate personhood is an actual libertarian value, when in actuality, no. Corporations themselves are creations of the state that would not exist in an actual free market. But baby libertarians, you know, read these, they read content from these outlets, and they think, okay, I should be supporting corporate personhood and tax cuts for mega corporations.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that Cato actually did come out against the first Gulf War, the one in 1990-91. You know, they actually did oppose that. So, but that was the.
They have occasionally good takes, like Cato and Reason both. They occasionally do have some good stuff. I'm not saying that it's all bad. It's just that, yeah, they are influenced by the people funding them. So, like Reason, for example, they'll have a lot of excellent things on like police brutality and like the drug war. Like, I don't want to say that they're all bad, but then the drug war with the good stuff, they'll have things encouraging you to be, say, anti-union or pro-corporate personhood.
Yeah, and like, well, so generally the reason I bring up them is, like, I think that it's a good, like, sort of reminder that the heritage of these people, the money that their families got, and the, like, things that they have supported downline based on that, yeah, to me, that says everything. To me, that says, like, why these people have been the way they've been. Like, for instance, if Facebook censors a post that's anti-government, to me, I'm going to be like, yeah, they were funded by the CIA. They were funded by Peter Thiel. They were funded by Greylock Partners. You know, fucking, it's like, when you recognize this, you recognize that, like, yeah, the funding actually creates the message. The money behind the message is right-wing authoritarianism. So, of course, when Rothbard, like, fucking supports, like, authoritarian right-wing garbage, and when the Cato Institute does the same thing in the end, it's like, they're doing that for a reason. And they don't always, like, Reason Magazine, for instance, they did a great piece that Marcus Davenport really didn't like when I brought up the fact that, like, Pinochet's regime was being extremely regressive and evil. And
yeah, not even Reason would support them. And Rothbard never supported Pinochet, so he got that right.
Yeah.
Hayek did, stupidly, but yeah, Rothbard always defended him.
Yeah, Chi-town. But so, all of that leads into plank number 3, which is abolish racial or group privileges, abolish affirmative action, set aside racial quotas, etc., and point out that the root of such quotas is the entire civil rights structure, which tramples on the property rights of every American. Yeah.
In theory, he's not wrong. Like, for example, like, I've had this discussion so many times where someone will say, oh, okay, so in your ideal society, businesses could put up a white Sony sign if they wanted to. I usually start out by talking about how things like segregation were the law of the land. Like, a lot of businesses who would have, served whoever they wanted couldn't afford the separate but equal accommodations that they were required to have. So there's that. There's also the fact that at the end of the day, yeah, these laws do amount to forced association, and that they're probably not the way to fix problems that were created by the state in the first place. So I know this is an unpopular opinion to the general public, but it's kind of hard to take issue with it in theory.
So, in practice, the people who got their property, again, heritage matters, they got it through, like, unethical means. And they got it through maintenance of and reinforcement of and, like, by reciprocal support, were supported by, like, racist violence and a violation of the NAP that, like, stretches, like, back to the first black people in America. So, like, when we look at the heritage of the property, when we look at the fact that, like, black people never got their, like, 40 acres and a mule, when we look at the fact that, like, everything has been gentrified the fuck, when we look at the fact that welfare has been used as a leash, when we look at the fact that, like, all of this shit has been done with redlining and redistricting, which makes, I'm disappointed John ain't here for this, but, like, yeah, there's, like, all these things, and then, like, you look at the fact that oftentimes there were laws that were on the books that were directly preventing black success, and that when there weren't laws on the books to prevent black success, they could just burn down their businesses like they did with Black Wall Street, or bomb their houses like they did with Philly Move. And so it's like, to me, I think that, like, when you see civil rights as nothing more than a vacuum institution of you have to do what I say, maybe that could be considered from a libertarian perspective.
Yeah, it's complicated because, in some ways, is it just retribution for all the other shit that the state has done in the past? Yeah, I mean, I do understand that argument.
Yeah, it's the same shit as, like, don't keep fucking up other people's countries, and then maybe they won't be migrating here. So.
Yeah, I don't. In some cases, I don't know how you determine who was wronged or how you would right the wrongs. I mean, I think regarding, for example, Greenwood, which happened in 1921, if the city of Tulsa decided to compensate the descendants of all the property owners who had property destroyed, I would probably say, okay, that's not a bad idea. But I don't know how you. But some of these things you just can't figure out who was victimized and who wasn't. And how do you measure the victimization? It's horrible things have been happening, but some of these things you just it's a safe bet that all the land in America at one point or another was probably stolen. Unfortunately, and if it was 500 years ago, how do you right that wrong? I don't see how you can.
The thing with that plank is it is very easy to interpret that as being absolutely pro racism and whatnot. The thing that they're trying to argue with that plank, obviously, is that two wrongs don't make a right. State enforced segregation can't be solved with state enforced integration and whatnot, and I understand why that argument would be. If you're, because say take affirmative action, for example, that is the state actively making it harder for white and Asian people to get into colleges to prop up black and Latino students and other ethnic groups, which I understand where that could sound, where saying that that's like a bad thing could sound wrong, but you don't, For starters, discrimination doesn't solve discrimination. But secondly, you're almost kind of like delegitimizing, like you're giving racists an out to like delegitimize what those students were able to achieve to get to those universities to begin with. So what they're effectively arguing is that the market would solve for discrimination on its own. You don't need the state to get involved to do that.
So I can see like your sort of more neutralist approach. However, the huge majority of the instatement of the original part of this platform was like in the I think it was the Rothbard Rockwell report, if I remember correctly, is the order that those R's go in. I could probably just scroll up, but I'm not going to. A huge amount
Either
of
Rockwell or Rockwell Rothbard, but yeah, there was that newsletter for a while.
yeah, and a huge amount of this was like talking about how David Duke is a lot better than like people say he is. And as a result of that, like I can't just take the neutralist approach. I can't act like so like for housemate started playing music, I guess. If that's loud, I'll have to go say something, but I don't think it's too loud at this particular juncture.
I don't hear anything.
They said in the 60s, when they gently chided the violent left, stop using violence, work within the system, and sure enough, it worked, as the former New Left now leads the respectable intellectual classes. So why wasn't the establishment willing to forgive and forget when a right-wing radical like David Duke stopped advocating violence, took off the Klan robes, and started working within the system? If it was okay to be a commie or a weatherman or whatever in your wild youth, why isn't it okay to have been a Klansman? Or to put it more precisely, if it was okay for the Reverend Justice Hugo Black or for the Lion of the Senate Robert Byrd to have been a Klansman, why not David Duke? The answer is obvious. Black and Byrd became members of the liberal elite or of the establishment, whereas Duke continued to be a right-wing populist and therefore anti-establishment, this time even more dangerous because within the system. He thought David Duke was anti-establishment.
Well, okay, you can be anti-establishment, but want your own version of the or something similar to the establishment. Like I don't actually disagree there.
Why?
I think at this particular point in history, like communists were no longer the threat that they had been while the Soviet Union still existed. Right-wing populists, I think, did represent the biggest threat to the status quo. That's not an endorsement of right-wing populists. It's just saying they were anti-establishment in that they wanted their own version of what we currently had. They wanted a state similar to what we have, but one that they were controlling. So they're not our allies, but they also were not allies of the status quo.
So
similar to the right-wing populists that we see today.
So here's the thing I could say about that, and I'll say this, and Chris, respond as soon as I stop talking. But Emma Goldman had it right when she said there is no communism in Russia. When she wrote her essay about how Russia and the Bolshevik strategy was basically just reskinned capitalism with no like actual mechanistic differences, except like now it's like essentially the Bakunin's people's stick. That was a great essay, and I recommend people read it because she was actually in Russia at the time and she fled. And the reason I bring that up is because communism was never really the threat. That what the threat was like things that challenged the power of the West and the Western hegemony. That's the reason the West and Western hegemony were willing to work with Mao's China after they instituted the open door policy, because suddenly when China could become a vassal, their culture was acceptable, and like when they could like basically weaponize their people's whatever in the form of supporting state capitalism, it was suddenly okay. And so Mao had this as part of his plank. He was like, let's do state capitalism. Let's use that as a way to transition toward the people's the dictatorship of the proletariat. That never happened. So for me, like I don't think communism was ever really a threat, and I do think authoritarian right-wing stuff was the establishment, which is why the CIA lubed the transition for so many Nazis. It's why Koch and the Bush family and all of that were Nazi money fueled and never had to give any of it back. It's why most Nazis literally just got away with it, at least the ones that weren't killed in the actual war itself. It's like the US government has no problem with like those people, and liberalism itself has allowed for a significant amount of this. Like radical approaches to actually changing shit enough to be against that establishment would never be able to reify its structures and help with the maintenance of the power that it had always had. And so when this country got its power by like, you know, stealing land from minorities and shit, and like ripping up treaties and fucking burning Black Wall Street, and you know, Stonewall, fucking murder fucking any minority that gets in your way, then like maybe I kind of get the impression that the establishment is not in fact leftist, despite the fact that a significant amount of university intellectuals had leftism as an ideology. I would say that that's more of like a symptom of counterculturalism and reading books rather than like, you know, having any real amountable political power or sway over the actual structures of the system.
Well, of course not. The establishment was never leftist. They've
Right.
co-opted leftist ideas, and there are leftists stupid enough to support it, thinking that they can gradually push it in the right direction. Yeah.
Right.
I think movements calling themselves communist were at one point considered the biggest threat during the Cold War era. But then once that ended, then yeah, right-wing populists did seemingly become the biggest threat to the establishment. And I mean, based on the rhetoric nowadays, they still currently are considered one of the biggest threats. If the all the, you know, panic over supposed right-wing extremism is to if that's any indication.
It's to make it seem patriotic to support the establishment by making the right seem unjustly picked on and criticized and censored and whatever, so that like when right-wing people are doing the exact thing the establishment wants, they think they're being rebels.
So you think that the you don't think that there's a rival right-wing faction
Sorry,
that wants power?
but both of you can say words.
Can I cut in here for a second, Rose? I gotta say that cuts literally both ways, Jeremy. As much as you can say that the state wants everybody to think that acting like one of these tiki torch bastards is, you know, like what they want, as much as you might say that, it works exactly the same way with the Antifa riots and stuff like that. Like when people are being encouraged to riot, when you find pallets of bricks and stuff just, you know, around, like that's almost certainly meant to stir up trouble to crack down by the state.
Manufacturing consent for sure.
Yeah, I find that coloring state action with right wing or left wing, when all state action is simply upward, it's simply pushing towards more totalitarianism, no matter what flavor it is. I feel like that's exactly what they want, because they want you to pay more attention to one side of the enemy than the other, when all it is just different coats of paint to continue to ratchet the power.
Well,
that's what I feel.
For me, for my money, and I'll make this very brief. I'm looking at the overwhelming trends and arcs in where the power actually is, and there is no reasonable like labeling, as far as I'm concerned, of the U.S. government as a leftist government. Maybe some other governments, maybe elsewhere, but like even the most like allegedly leftist governments are still now doing like anti-minority shit, like fucking they're doing state capitalism, they're doing all this. So for me, I can't just say that both sides are equally at fault here, or both sides are equally represented by state power. I have to look at one more than the other, because one is more than the other. Like equality.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I think it was a mistake to act like the Soviet Union was ever a threat to the U.S. they just wanted to justify enormous military spending.
Mhm.
Plus the system doesn't work, and they were all acting. Oh, it came as a shock when the Soviet Union finally fell apart. Said not to anybody who understands economics law.
Right.
Mises,
Well, how many people actually understand economics, though? Not
Yeah.
nearly enough.
Mises himself said that the Soviet Union probably would have fallen apart in the 20s if it wasn't for a lot of foreign aid that was given to them. And just as Ayn Rand pointed out, even using primitive technology under the Tsars, Russia was a major. The old Russian Empire was a major grain exporter, and then after they go communist, they have to import food.
It's just sort of like
But,
go. Say words. You've said barely anything, so I'm going to give you as much time as you need.
Just short response to what you were saying earlier. I didn't mean to imply that I thought that it was an equal support on both sides, and I firmly think that the right wing has definitely been supported far more than the left wing by the state in America since its existence. But I would explain that exclusively by three things. One, the killing of the old revolution that happens after every revolution, where you have to get rid of all the people who are revolution starters so that you can keep your regime in control.
Night of the Long Knives.
Yeah, like that happens with what happened with the founding fathers. Barely anybody knows about the actual founding fathers like Thomas Paine and Sam Adams and what they actually believed, because they were anarchists. And anything but the name, they were anarchists. But then you have people like Benjamin Franklin, not Thomas Jefferson. Sorry, Washington, and Franklin, and fucking the bank guy, Alexander Hamilton. Those bastards took over the revolution. So that was the first swing towards the right wing. The second swing towards the right wing was obviously in the coalition to support slavery, and that actually ended up causing the Civil War. But both sides were right wing. It's fucking hilarious. It was just they were arguing over the right to have slaves, the state or the common man. Nobody. That's the answer. And then the third swing towards right wing was in response to a totally manufactured leftism that did pretend left wing with the
Hold on.
rainbow.
Hold on. OBS Studio disconnected for some reason, and I don't know why.
Fuck, how long ago?
A few seconds. Reconnection successful, so we're back online. I think.
Heads again. They're fucking with us.
Yeah, let me say the words you were gonna say. They swing left. You were saying start like a little bit before that.
Well, I was just saying that because of those three major points, they swing right more often, and when they swing left, it's only to sort of, I guess, ease the pressure off, make it not seem so bad at the time. Be like, oh no, we care about individuals and stuff like that. Oh, but no, we got an enemy. We better go back to nationalism and that insane shit.
Let me ask you, have you read Friendly Fascism by Bertram Gross?
Personally, no, but I have heard some good things about it. I need to get to it.
It's such a good fucking book, yo. Yeah, I plug it anywhere I can, and like even if you just like even if you just want the sort of a fun version of it that hits the high points, fucking Consolidated, a leftist band, wrote a song called Friendly Fascism about the book, and it hits literally all the high points of it. It's sort of like an ad. It's like a teaser for what the book has to offer. And the book goes over the fact that overt fascism was much harder to manage, and it was much harder to get the people on board with. So now what they do is they have a friendlier version of it that's packaged in a way that makes people okay with it. And that's a point that I can't you want to talk the founders. To me, the founders and the founding is a psyop. It's a psyop because what it's designed to do is it's designed to get people on board with this idea that minimal government is possible and that this country stands for freedom. It don't. And it never be do. And so if you can get people on board with that, and if you can just get them constantly reference the founders and the documents and say, well, if we just go back to the Constitution, fuck off.
So then they're not considering, what if we went further than that and we just went to, no state? Yeah.
They shot the real founders in the back of the head. That's what they fucking did.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, how would we get back to that anyway? There's what's your plan to get back to it? There's no way.
Go Bigfoot.
Through personal association, said the same way the first ones did, through personal association, word of mouth, and constant preaching of the flame of liberty.
Mhm.
We won't stop until the government does.
And like fucking common sense is great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I firmly believe that what the Libertarian Party should be doing instead of existing is just turn into a charity that runs soup kitchens where they hand out copies of No Treason and Common Sense with every bowl of soup.
Well, originally though, like it was meant mostly as a front for literature distribution and education, so that wouldn't actually be that far away from its original purpose. Like when it first started, it was holding their conventions in people's living rooms. It turns out one of the guys who was present at the original meetings was a Fed, so the Feds were there from the beginning. But anyway, its original purpose was supposed to be a front for education and basically just networking and recruiting.
Oh, and also, go. Say words?
Just gonna say, because they started a party, they should have known where it was going. That's all I'll say.
I know somebody who's interested in starting a caucus that's very similar to what you're describing, by the way, Bigfoot. If you're interested, I can connect you with them. They're in my Discord.
Is it the Eggplant Caucus?
No.
The Eggplant Caucus.
Well, because the Eggplant Caucus is taking over, okay? You can't stop
But you
this.
could put eggplants in some soup.
He's wasting his time.
I think the Libertarian
He
Party
must join the Eggplant.
it
Anyway,
seems to me a lot of the Libertarian Party was formed by people who were basically had nowhere to go after the collapse of Ayn Rand's movement, in particular the Nathaniel Branden Institute, which was probably one of the more effective libertarian organizations that ever existed.
Nathaniel Branden, rest in peace. He was like a genuinely good person in his later years. He had some bad ideas, in my opinion, to start out. Like, he was anti-gay, for instance, and he thought, like, sodomy was a sign of, like, cultural decay. But, like, in his later years, he literally personally apologized for all that and, like, actually improved and became a libertarian motivational speaker. And, like, we were mutuals on Facebook until he died.
Yeah, well, Chris Matthew Scabara had so many nice things to say about Nathaniel Branden, and he was definitely gay. I mean, or he's always been gay, Chris Matthew Scabara. But there are a lot more gay men attracted to Ayn Rand than you'd expect. But
well, she does look like a gay man.
but that
Also, listen, she had to have been a gay man with the way that she described those people in Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, right?
Like, that is a homosexual attraction she had to those people.
Yeah. But in the Nathaniel Branden Institute, just sold classes, and as far as I know, they were always a for-profit organization. The other thing I've heard, too, is that back in the 60s, it was about 50-50. I mean, Nathaniel Branden came to a seminar in 1996, and he immediately said, what happened to the women? That apparently in the 60s, it was about even, men and women. You certainly don't see that in the Libertarian Party or most libertarian events now.
Yo, okay, actually, here's...
maybe like 2-to-1 to... somewhere between 2-to-1 and 3-to-1.
Here's my moment. Hey, the last person who, like, gave me at all any desire to like, put a real person's name on the ballot instead of just writing in Sonic the Hedgehog, was John McAfee. And John McAfee, literally, when he got the shaft at the LNC, as many people do, he finished off his speech there by saying that, like, I don't see very many, like, women or very many black people or et cetera, shame on you. And those were his words. He just came out and said, like, y'all fucking suck at messaging, y'all are making this a fucking club and excluding people, y'all are bad at actually defending freedom, shame on you. He said shame on you to libertarians.
Clearly, women are just too irrational to understand libertarianism.
Yeah, dog brain.
Just weird.
Fucking.
So anyway, what's the next plank?
So the next plank, and I'm assuming Chris Baker is still privy to the words that are wordsing. So I think I saw a toothbrush. So maybe there's a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take back the streets, crush criminals, and by this I mean, of course, not white-collar criminals or inside traders, but violent street criminals, robbers, muggers, rapists, murderers. Cops must be unleashed and allowed to administer instant punishment, subject, of course, to liability when they are in error. Now, the latter part, fine, okay? But let me be super clear here. The prior part, holy fucking shit. White-collar criminals are the biggest criminals, in my opinion.
Yes, but he's talking about rapists and muggers, so just to play devil's advocate, like, if we are being forced to pay for fucking state-funded cops, should they not at least do what we're paying them to do? Now, I'm not naive enough to think that they're ever actually going to protect and serve us, because that's never been their purpose. Their purpose has always been to uphold the status quo and serve as the state's armed enforcers. I'm just saying, like, the idea there is not, it's not an unreasonable idea that if we're going to be forced to pay for them, they should at the very least remove people who try to mug you when you walk outside your house. It's
like
mostly
taxes?
just a stupid idea, because it wasn't going to happen.
I'm being mugged every 2 weeks. I look at my check and it's like, this was taken out, that was taken out.
Korean.
Street muggers are like a very small problem compared to the people fucking taking money out of my paycheck every time I get paid.
Kareem,
I don't even look at my pay stubs, because they actually just raise my blood pressure unnecessarily, seeing how much money gets taken out of them.
Kareem, introduce and say some words, and then Bigfoot, you were going to say words?
Yeah, somewhere. Hi, I'm Kareem. I'm an ANCAP man and ANCAP stan sometimes. Sometimes I'm a communalist. I'm a cool dude. Currently, I'm reading Max Stirner, because I said I would eventually do that. Overall, I don't agree with him on everything. Overall, he's pretty based. I actually do think. I'm enjoying him a lot more than Ayn Rand. So there's that. You can also find me at Kareem6633 on Twitter, and Anarch Unity. I'm an ANCAP man, an ANCAP stan, and hopefully, I'm still trying to say, okay, hey, if Jeremy Kaufman's going to say all this stuff, all right, let's debate it. I'm not beyond, like, just because I disagree with you or I think you're saying crazy stuff. I think if someone has really bad views on things, then we should debate them and actually win. I don't think it's a good idea to just name call an ad hominem, which is something he does a lot. Like, if you really are the man, let me see, let me put like you in your place with a lot of things. And as far as I'm concerned, people need to stand up to the bad parts of the Libertarian Party if we're going to have a party. And I also checked out the thing. I do recommend going and looking at Chase Oliver's thing with John Stossel. It was pretty decent. It was pretty good. I think so far he's doing okay. So we'll see. Was it a mistake to go on Tim Pool? I was talking with Chris about that. Tim has a large audience, but it's up to him. I don't think that. I think people are making more of a huge deal, but he does get numbers. So if we're looking at it from a numerical perspective, sure.
And which Chris were you talking with about that?
Chris Baker.
Chris Baker. Well, Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman and Doug Casey went on to Phil Donahue once. I mean, and we've certainly seen Ron Paul go with that. Was it Morton Downey Jr.? I mean, you got to go into hostile territory.
Yeah.
So, my big problem with this is I don't like the cultural implications here. I don't like the cultural implications of white-collar criminals aren't in fact bad, and the real people who should be stopped are robbers, muggers, rapists, and murderers. As though white-collar criminals don't employ those people. As though white-collar criminals are not those people. To me, the fact that he felt the need to delineate between the two is abject pandering. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to create an environment where it makes it easier to pass off the crimes that are committed by right-wing authorities, the rich people who would most often be considered white-collar criminals, and like make it seem like the crime on the ground floor is the worst, the actual bad stuff. I've got more problems with it, but Bigfoot, say words, and then Bryce. Or Bryce and then Bigfoot. So, you guys can fight for the first.
You're good, man.
All right. So I guess what I would ask is he talking about like white collar people who are committing crimes, or is he referring to white collar crime? Like
that one.
I'm sure he would probably consider tax evasion a white collar crime, for example. Well, and if that's what he's referring to, I can kind of understand where he's coming from. Because, like, yeah, I don't think tax evasion is a crime. I don't think, and yeah, hypothetically, if you're going to be forced to fund a police state, would much rather not. But if you're forced to, I could understand the argument to be made where nonviolent crimes you shouldn't waste cops on that. You should be focusing on the more violent shit.
Well, I'll say my piece after Bigfoot says. Words?
All right. So what's funny is that I actually disagree partially with Jeremy, partially with Rose, and ironically, so anyway, let me get to what I mean. So I agree that white-collar crimes aren't as important as the other one, as long as white-collar crimes are things like, say, bribery or other sort of financial crimes where you might say, oh, well, it's illegitimate to bribe someone for a market benefit. Why? Why is it illegitimate? Because they're in a place of trust. Well, it just sounds like their employer should be compensating them better. It sounds like you're compensating them better than their employer could, and so it's just the market at work, and you call it bribery because you want them to be legally restricted in how many options they can take. Things like that are in sections of Ethics of Liberty and other books that Rothbard wrote, which I feel like inform this part of this plank. However, he can fuck completely and entirely off with the end part of it, because there is never a situation where we should take the state's tools to try to end it. Like, fucking Jake, holy shit! J.R.R. Martin, or no, fuck, Jesus Christ! Why can't I say Tolkien? What happens when you take the power from the enemy and try to use it for your own benefit? It is not going to work. When you use the state's tools to try to solve the people's problems, you make them dependent and you make the state more powerful. You cannot rot the state. You cannot cut it out. If you're using its apparatus of force and control in order to quote unquote clean the streets, which shouldn't even be public in the first place, and which should definitely not be kicking out the homeless, which were artificially created by the fact that 25% of all land is held by the state.
And we will definitely get into the homeless part soon here. Your bastard amalgamation of George R.R. Martin and J.R. Tolkien fucking actually works, because Game of Thrones makes very similar points, and those who try to crush the wheel get run over by it. Fucking I've watched now every episode of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, and so I now know what the references are, and I've got very specific viewpoints on this. Most notably, the thing that's going to piss off anybody out there who is a fan of Gibber Grubbs is that I don't dislike the first. I don't dislike the way the show ended. Also, I'm checking live chat over here. 2 messages from Reinhold removed, but I'm not sure. But hello, Reinhold. I hadn't checked the chat this whole time.
He's being censored, apparently.
Yeah, I guess. I was gonna say though.
Well, let me. I'm gonna send him a link. If you want to say words, you can just say words.
All right.
But
I was gonna say
like
color climb.
what?
I was gonna say words or.
I was going to say the ending sucked, and I will fight you on that.
Well, so
I watched Game of Thrones.
I'm not going to say much about the ending, except I think that the whole point of the show is a cynical fucking point about how power corrupts, and I think the ending is their final cynical fuck you to anybody who might think it doesn't.
No, the ending was good. It was the final season because they rushed it. Like suddenly
Yeah,
their
that.
universe had fast travel, which annoyed me.
Yeah.
It used to take an entire season for them to travel somewhere, and then suddenly they had fast travel.
Yeah, that I can see. But
Yeah.
the actual substance is what seems to piss a lot of people off, so.
Okay, yeah, no, that much I agree on.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll have a Gipper Grubs episode someday where we just talk shit about the show. So the next first off, let me send Reinhold a link. I think Reinhold probably wants to say more, but
I was going to make the point of white collar crime actually can lead to more of these petty crimes. I'll give you an actual example. Gavin Newsom is the best example. You let white collar crime, you let somebody embezzle, you let somebody do all these, back, door deals, you let him take tons of money and power. You basically, I guess he's Nancy Pelosi's nephew or something, so you give him a ton of power. So he's definitely a white collar criminal. He's not out there using actual kinetic violence. But now to keep himself in power, what does he do? Well, from my understanding, in California, there's things like theft and stuff that people just let go. And in my opinion, he does that because, hey, he wants to keep his white collar position. So why not appease a lot of the voting bases, and why not appease a lot of people by saying, hey, go ahead. You can't afford to live here because the taxes are so high. Just steal. And that creates actual theft and stuff. So white collar crime, when it's done in the upper echelons of the elites, can lead to, in my opinion, a lot of this lower crime because the ruling class will allow it. Then I know who he is. I think some people do. But Banksy has a nice little quote that says, people who follow, I have more contempt for people who follow orders. People who follow orders are the ones that, burn down villages and stuff like that. People who don't do that. I forget exactly his.
I believe there's a term for what you were just describing, Kareem, and I believe it's called anarcho-tyranny.
I don't like that term, but yes.
That term is not great.
It's not.
What about Enron wiping out all these people's pensions and stuff like that? There's a white collar crime can be extremely destructive to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways.
So what?
At the
That is white collar.
So
because if you're keeping people's pigeons, that's just crime.
So, but
Yeah.
I don't understand what Go ahead.
The distinction is that instead of being on a more blue collar level, instead of being just he hit that man with a hammer, that guy's a piece of shit, it's more nuanced, and it's also generally more widespread. So white collar crime has a Wikipedia entry, and it lists things. I'm going to list some of those things. Wage theft. Wage theft is a concept that is very familiar to me because I had it happen to me when I worked at Jack in the Box. It's not paying overtime for overtime hours, not paying full-time for full-time hours. It's trying to nickel and dime and finagle your way out of paying your employees what you fucking owe them. And I'm really glad that the Jack in the Box Yeah.
So bastards. That obviously every libertarian should be against contract violation. We are basically contract based.
Right. And so I'm really glad that the Jack in the Box franchise I worked for got sued 3 times and lost every one of those times. Fuck you, Jack in the Box. But fraud, technically any type of fraud is white collar crime, because all you're doing is just saying things that aren't true and profiting off of that. Bribery. Now you can say that bribery can be less unacceptable in certain circumstances. But if, for instance, you're bribing a public official so that your thing can go through, so that you can get your land deal, so that you can force somebody off theirs, that is white collar crime. And it happens all, like, lobbying is effectively just like elongated bribery, etc. Ponzi schemes are also listed here. The Federal Reserve and the Social Security Administration are both example of large-scale Ponzi schemes, and if we're mad at those, then we should be mad at smaller-scale versions of the same thing. Insider trading.
So,
I don't necessarily agree that all of that is a crime, because, I don't think, for instance, Martha Stewart did anything wrong, but fuck Nancy Pelosi's insider trading. And that was...
Well, I mean, that's a thing.
Yeah.
So basically what it's like to me is that white-collar crime is a massive umbrella that is not sufficiently specific enough to be used in an article like this, the way Rothbard is using it. White-collar crime includes plenty of things that he himself, at the moment he was writing these words, would have disagreed with. So it's just stupid, in my opinion, to get hung up on.
Okay, going back to the idea that it increases blue-collar crime, like Rothbard is describing, okay. Jeremy mentioned the Federal Reserve. At the highest levels, you have people destroying the value of the currency that we are forced to use and that we work for. That definitely increases white-collar crime. That definitely increases blue-collar crime, because people are looking for ways to make money.
There's even worse things in it, and to get all to go super leftist, today, to draw attention to other things like the Congo. There's blue and white collar crime in that. There is blue collar crime, in my opinion, because there's people forcing people to mine cobalt, and then there's white collar crime of people like Space Karen and friends who are like, we need more cobalt for these useless things. And I get you can use it for phones and stuff. Fine, trade for the cobalt. Trade, learn how to trade.
Also,
hire an Austrian.
Yeah, and it's like
and then
that.
Even,
Yes.
Go.
And then even Lindsey Graham actually kind of slipped up, which he always does because he's a moron. He's probably one of the worst people on earth next to Nikki Haley, and said, "Oh, well, we can't allow the Russians to win because we have $2 trillion of natural minerals in Ukraine." And I'm like, oh, see, this is the issue. White collar crime ends up being blue collar crime at a lower level, but it's really, really bad because it's okay, the white collar criminals want to steal resources for their donors who are probably lobbyists in, I don't know, Bechtel or some corporation. I don't know where. I don't know exactly who wants the minerals, what American corporation does, but I can find out. Same thing with the Congo. So,
or
not to get super leftist.
Texaco.
But, yeah.
I bring up Texaco all the fucking time because they're evil, and because Texaco poisoned and genocided a whole tribe of 150,000 people who were already limited in population. They just moved in there, turned the place into a giant fucking waste pit, and then after giant fucking waste pit, suddenly a bunch of people started to get cancer, and they started to say, oh, this oil that's slicking your water supplies and everywhere now, and you can't escape it, actually that's great for you, and it has vitamins in it. You can wash your hair with it, and it'll make your hair radiant. And they said all this lying propagandistic bullshit to get these people to use water that was already objectively bad for you, bad tasting, bad smelling, and also in general, your body knows when something is unhealthy and is telling you, don't fucking drink this petroleum. It's dead, decayed matter. Don't. So when they did that to these people, when they did that, Texaco just got away with it because they already had lawyers and representatives in the direct government there. And then they absorbed into Chevron. And now, the guy who successfully got a settlement on the lawsuit to these motherfucking evil pieces of shit who don't deserve anything, including breath, those people, they are now actively jailing the lawyer for like contempt of court because the court itself was owned by Chevron. And this is allowed. And so
where was this
Yeah.
Texaco thing?
like a couple decades ago while Texaco was still Texaco and not Chevron.
And where though?
Here, I think it was Ecuador, but I might be full of shit, so I'm gonna look this up real quick. Texaco,
It might be.
Texaco.
I thought that was well established.
Yeah, but my brain is not like on right now about this. Texaco oil waste pit lawsuit. I think it's Ecuador, but I want to make sure. Ecuadorian, yeah. See, so
they did this to some of the indigenous tribes then.
yes,
Yeah, don't get me started on that one. What they've done to some people in the Amazon is probably worse than what was done to indigenous people up here
yeah.
or in the U.S.
They literally just genocided them by fucking their water supplies and got away with it. That's the effect of white collar crime, is that you can do whatever the fuck you want. Immortal Technique put out a song called Rich Man's World about this shit.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
have money. Pay,
The world
you just
is a
pay.
college of corporations.
Yep.
You know,
Joseph.
Peter Gorman died 2 years ago. He was quite possible. He wrote an article in the 80s about ayahuasca for High Times. It was the first article ever written about ayahuasca outside of academia. And he worked with the Matsi tribes. He said, they wanted all these things. He says, I made sure I got them: land rights, air rights, water rights, and mineral rights. So he said, the Matsi tribe has all these things on their land. I said, good. Now we need to do that for all of them.
Yep. And so I'm going to hold off for a second so that Rose can get back in. There we go. So copyright infringement, I don't count that, right? Labor racketeering, but like at the same time, copyright infringement could just be like, this is my product and it's not. So that would fall under fraud and that would be crime.
Mhm.
Sorry,
Right.
what-
Like if
fraud,
you signed like a
it makes sense.
contract with someone
Yeah.
saying do not copy, it's one thing, but yeah. IP is not a legitimate form of property, so who gives a shit?
Bigfoot.
I was just saying that, just like what Rose was saying, if it's literally you saying, like, if it was me saying that I am insanity is free and this is, my work that I made and it's something that your work that you made and I'm selling it to people, that's fraud. That's, enforceable. But you can't own a recipe. I don't care what anybody
Yeah.
says. Every order of actions in order to create a chosen result is a recipe, one way or another, and any of them cannot be owned. And once created, you can keep it a secret if you can. But if it gets out, it's tough, buddy.
Yep.
Sorry.
You do not own a drug molecule. You can keep the process for making it secret if you want, but I don't give a shit if someone else figures out how to reverse engineer it and starts producing life-saving medicine cheaper.
For sure. And then we've got labor racketeering, which, for those of you who don't know, it's basically just like, protection pay, but like in the labor market. Go ahead.
No, I just said, like taxes.
Yeah, essentially, only but for the labor market.
Hey, get jumped.
Yeah. And so like, for instance, like the things covered under the RICO Act. That's what the Wikipedia article really hones in on. So, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Act, allows federal law enforcement to charge a person or group of people with racketeering defined as committing multiple violations of certain varieties within a 10-year period. And so, like, fucking, generally speaking, it's the same kind of racketeering as, like, the kind covered in Smedley Butler's War is a Racket, but for, like, coercing people into a certain... Go?
Well, if you saw what got passed today, yeah, I think this is very relevant because you can correct me if I'm wrong. The House just passed the draft bill for ages 18 to 26. I just saw that.
They
So
did.
yeah, they're trying to do that
There was
again because they're scared.
There was
of
already a
TV.
draft. The draft still exists. It's just that they made it automatic now. You don't have to go register manually for it. Now you're automatically registered no matter what.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. Reinhold.
well, it's not going to pass, but that's another story. It's because
Reinhold.
they added with a whole bunch of other amendments.
It
Yep.
has been a bit. Say words about who you is, and if there's anything you wanted to fill us in on, like for the course of the stream, I wasn't checking chat. I was reading a bunch of stuff.
You got censored. The feds were removing your comments.
No, I removed those comments myself. That's
What?
self-censoring.
Oh, okay. Well,
You call us bitches or something like I once did to someone and should
No,
have
it was just-
deleted?
No, I made a couple comments for something that happened early in the chat, and I was just like, I don't care about that anymore. I'm going to get rid of it in case it got read. I didn't want to focus on that again. So.
that's fine. So if you want to fill us in on something here, we're just talking white collar crime because we're on plank 3.
So yeah, name's Reinhold. I've been libertarian all my life. Yeah, I've been writing about libertarianism for 30 years. As far as white collar crime goes, I mean, again, I think what you said before fits. It's a very broad subject that I think a lot of people try to equate as being victimless, although in a lot of times it's not victimless, but it's seen as something not as important or concerning as, real crime, right?
Yeah.
So that's when you get into trouble, is that if the crime has a victim, it has a victim. And if that victim is taking someone's life or taking their, freedom or something like that, that's bad. But also if you take their money through fraud or some other means, then that's bad too, because then they have to, they can't survive and do the things they need to do in a society like this, where, you're not really taken care of. So
Yeah, and there are
you have to
multiple.
take care of yourself, and that takes away your safety net.
Yeah, and there are multiple other forms that this wiki lists, and there's many more other than this too. Like there's, fucking white collar crime. One of the things that this thing even fucking talks about is environmental crime, like what was fucking discussed earlier about the Texaco bullshit and a bunch of other. So it's like that, and then there's also embezzlement, which is like. You make it harder to pay everybody equitably in your company, and you make it harder for the company to run because you're siphoning money off for your greedy ass. There's like identity theft and forgery. Both of those are victim crimes, and they're also covered under white collar because so all of those things is just like different forms of, business, finance, banking, corporate, blah blah crime. And it fucking matters. And for him to just be like, and what I don't mean is white collar crime, it seems like he's just sucking right wing cock.
So, okay, again, devil's advocate. White collar crime fucks us all over, but we don't see it happening. However, if you live in a community where, for example, you're paying tax dollars for, say, the park down the street, but you can't actually use that park because, you try to bring your kid there and fucking tweakers keep coming over and harassing you for money, and there are hypodermic needles strewn all over the ground. Like, that feels a lot more real than the theoretical idea that you're being screwed over by white-collar criminals. So, again, I think this was actually an attempt to appeal to regular people by saying, okay, those people who are ruining your community, yeah, we're going to take care of them when the current establishment won't do that because they don't care about you.
Well, sure.
It's bourgeoisie against the proletariat. It's the same thing. It's class distinctions. So it's him taking some sort of Marxism and putting it into libertarianism in some way.
Right, because I've been in that position. Like, there are some gorgeous parks in my city. You can't use any of them, though, because you'll just get harassed the entire time by aggressive homeless people, and there's trash and needles strewn everywhere. So I can understand the appeal, like the idea that, okay, if I'm paying for this park, shouldn't I at least be able to use it? Like, shouldn't it be maintained and be kept clear of people who are just going to piss everywhere and harass me while I'm trying to, say, let my kid play on the playground? So again, I kind of get it. I'm not saying that it was ever going to be a winning strategy, but I get where they were coming from.
Right. I think it was more a play on the idea of white collar crime being more of a rich person crime, and the regular people aren't really involved in that or are victim to it. So it's not something we should be worrying about, because we're doing a populist movement, and the populist movement is the regular people, the bourgeoisie. You know what I'm saying? There's
also the fact that the idea that you can stop white collar crime. The idea of being able to stop blue collar crime seems a lot more doable. Trying to stop white collar crime, yeah, good luck with that.
Bigfoot, you had your hand up for a second?
Yeah. I just feel like in the case of like a park or something like that, the answer should, at least in the case of anarchists, always be direct action. If you see a problem and you have time in the hands, do it, fix it, make it better as best as you can, and try to, like, I feel like the idea that we should ever use a resource like the cops in order to try to make that sort of positive change is just self-defeating, and will end up creating the same problem that we hated in the first place.
Right. Well, that's because they won't actually. They won't actually do that. They'll just turn around and arrest you, for example.
Well, even if they do, then the people who replace them in 20 years won't. Like, it's not going to matter what they do tomorrow. It matters what they do 10 decades down the road, which is what they always do, which is oppress us.
Well,
exactly.
And like the other half of that is that this white collar crime creates a lot of the fucking backbone for a lot of the bluer collar crime. Like, people would not be as needled up if society was better. Like, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's community. You give people better resources, you give people like an actual good place to be, you give people like hope, a positive direction, a place that they can point their eyes on the future. There will be a lot less addiction to begin with, and by the downstream token, a lot less needles in your public park. So it's like, if you want to make things worse, incarcerate them, because, you know, that's just going to reduce their community even further. You know, if you want to make things worse, beat the fuck out of them so that they just go right back to their sedatives, because everything hurts now. You want to make things worse, treat these addicts and poor people like you did Kelly Thomas, or George Floyd, or fucking any number. I fucking, for some reason, I'm spacing on his name, but the guy who sold loose cigarettes in, I think, Louisiana, and he got like compressed.
Oh God. I always forget his name too.
It was in New York, wasn't it?
Oh, maybe. But like,
he was like selling cigarettes.
Yeah, selling cigarettes on the street corner apparently is a death sentence, because that's what requiring permits for everything gets you.
Yeah,
I knew a guy back in high school who did that. You know, he was always selling stuff. He'd like sell single cigarettes to people. He didn't even smoke, but you know.
Yeah, entrepreneurial. Yeah, I remember people getting in trouble for selling stuff at school.
Eric Garner.
And Jeremy is right. Although I would say the opposite of addiction is connection and hope. Seeing all the overdose deaths that happened back in West Virginia, there's just such a culture of hopelessness there. It's because you've seen all these people leave, and it just, when people don't have connection and they don't have hope, that's what happens. They end up going to these things. That's ultimately why, that's one thing 12-step meetings do for people. You just give them a connection and hope, and you give them a meeting that they can go to every single week. And to their credit, groups like AA do not cancel for anything.
It works if you work it. So
yeah, that was when all the COVID shit came down. That was one of the first things I thought of. What's going to happen to these people who need their AA meetings?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I said that too. I'm like, we're going to see a huge increase in deaths of despair, such as from drug overdoses or suicides.
Yeah,
we did.
And so,
those people who wanted to go to their AA meetings just hated grandma.
Yeah, clearly you're just trying to kill grandma.
Yeah.
Why are you so selfish? Do you just want a haircut, Karen?
Yeah, and so that's what I'm like. All of these things are made worse by white collar crime, and for people to act otherwise, for especially libertarians to act otherwise, it's just so fucking asinine to me. Like,
I think.
Go.
I think what you need to understand about the thought out process of the difference between white collar crime and blue collar crime and where we should spend our focus. It's a populist appeal that will then be used later in order to convince people to violate someone's rights.
Yes.
For another purpose.
Yes.
That's all it's for.
It's
just a populist appeal. That's all it is.
It's rhetorical loading so that you can justify, and that's why he had to start this whole thing off by appealing to David Duke fans, because David Duke was pulling the same fucking garbage and he wanted to be on, and like it's also why he like, and we, you know, honestly we probably won't even have much time to go on to many of the other planks. We'll probably finish with 5 today and still have to do another fucking paleo problems, but like the general vibe is like, that's the reason he was appealing to Duke fans, to Buchanan fans, to George H.W. Bush fans. You know, this is fucking great. Now that, like, I'm just an open anarchist asshole conspiracy theorist with my family, I get to bring up these things, and, oh, fuck. When I told my dad I was doing a thing on the... Oh, shit, my fucking OBS disconnected again for some reason. They wanted to work with Pat Buchanan, and it hit him like a ton of bricks. You could see his expression shift and his shoulders get tense. Because my dad fucking hates Pat Buchanan for misappropriating the Bible and trying to warp the words of Christ around a conservative message. Because even though my dad is a conservative, he says the Bible shouldn't be fucking used for that. And the fact that, like, they used it for that purpose and tried to isolate conservative control in the name of Christ, he says is blasphemy, and should not, like, he says conservatives are generally more likely to support a Christian message, but he says that they shouldn't do that using the Bible. It's actually one of the reasons that he recently left, not recently, like years ago, but one of the reasons that he left the church that we grew up with. You know? Because they started to pull that shit. What?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, Pat Buchanan used to work for Nixon. I mean, what else do you need to know besides that?
Yeah.
But you can understand, Rothbard was saying that Pat Buchanan was the ideological high point of his version of paleo-libertarianism.
Yeah.
He was the ideal person.
No, he thought that they
No,
could
yes, he
work
did
with
say that.
paleo
No.
because they were at least
stated
anti-war and had some overlap. Like, I've
Yeah.
seen
You know,
this scenario play out so many times with libertarians thinking they can ally with people who have that mentality.
This wasn't an ally, though. This was him saying that he believed at that time that Pat Buchanan was the ideal of what he was trying to put together.
I mean, I've read the same material. That was not my takeaway, but okay.
I came to the sad realization recently that a lot of great people and libertarians had their jump the shark moment, and Rothbard's jump the shark was when he quit Liberty Magazine and decided to do all this paleo crap. So
Yeah.
after they jump the shark, you just throw everything out. You think about L. Neil Smith becoming a big Trump supporter, John Hosper's disavowing libertarianism after the World Trade Center. Ayn Rand was probably in 1968. Quite a few people had their jump the shark moment in March of 2020 as well. So just look and see at this moment where they jump the shark, and then you can just discard everything after that until they die. And it does happen, unfortunately. It's kind of sad that it happened to
Walter
Rothbard.
Block, for example, used to respect Walter Block. Then, October 7th happens, and oh my God, he just throws every single libertarian principle he had goes out the window.
You could have thrown out Walter Block for COVID. You could have thrown out Walter Block even for the time he denounced Wendy McElroy, which was a while ago. But Wendy's always been a principled libertarian. I will definitely go to bat and just grenade for Wendy McElroy.
Yeah, the writing was on the wall with him, I guess. guess I'm like, I guess I'll give him a pass here, even though, wow, that's cringe. But yeah, then his defense of Israel and seemingly throwing out every single principle, like every single libertarian property rights principle. Yeah, wow. Just listening to him is just infuriating. He was rightly removed from the Mises Institute. He acts like he's acting like he's the victim. He's like, they removed me because I just thought differently. No, that was very justified.
And
Well,
like,
anyway, guys,
that you want to, you have a brand you want to stick to, and unfortunately, sometimes you need to remove people who aren't consistent with that brand.
Right.
Uh,
Bigfoot, I hear you. The way your tone sounds like you're booking. But before you do, let's just briefly hit on Plank 5, because like
all right.
because
Yeah.
Plank 5, to me, is the most evil plank, and you touched on it earlier. Plank 5 is all of this and more. So we just justified white collar crime, to appeal to right wingers and to say that no, the real problem is those people down the street. And we talked about how he was also trying to say the same thing when the person wasn't even particularly criminal and just like on welfare or something with the underclass rule. Say words?
No, you cut out for a second. I was like, oh, they got him.
Oh, okay. So we talked about how he like tried to say that white collar crime isn't real, and what you should really be worried about is those people down the street. We then talked about how we also talked about how he tried to say that that like people on welfare are ostensibly criminal as well, and also the actual rulers of the country, underclass rule. So when he talked about unleashing the cops, that wasn't his only unleash the cops moment. He said, quote, "Take back the streets. Get rid of the bums. Again, unleash the cops to clear the streets of bums and vagrants. Where will they go? Who cares? Hopefully they will disappear. That is, move from the ranks of the petted and cosseted bum class to the ranks of the productive members of society." How fucking evil is that?
Despicable. Absolutely fucking despicable, and it just fills my fucking mouth with bile to hear. Especially from someone that converted me into an anarchist. Like, the idea that the homeless is not anything but a side effect of statism is a fucking joke. And to just suggest fucking pushing them out of the streets using state force is the most totalitarian shit I think I've ever heard in my fucking life. It's insane. Actually insane.
I mean,
Yes.
I might have been talking about how why that idea would be appealing to people who have to deal with them, but like, if we're going to talk about the homeless problem, I would talk about why people are winding up homeless in the first place. So much of that has to do with, for example, monetary policy. I mean, it all traces back to monetary policy. It's the fact that people can't afford to save. There's the continually rising cost of living. People can't afford housing. They can't pay their bills. More and more people are ending up in a position where they're facing homelessness. So I think we should talk about these issues before we start complaining about the homeless people themselves. Then, of course, the issue is why people are winding up on drugs, because they don't really have anything to live for.
And that's the thing. Like, if you started to do that, then you'd be saying that white collar crime is the root of a lot of these other crimes, and then you might have to admit that the rich people you're trying to appeal to, the white, rich, powerful people who built the power structure, are in fact part of the problem. And then you might have to admit that affirmative action and all these civil rights things were just band-aids on the gaping bullet wounds that they caused, and maybe a lot of this other issues are just issues that were concomitant and comorbid with these like sicknesses that the state caused. And then you'd have to admit that maybe the lefties have a point, which is, you know, what Rothbard used to do before he got cucked. Bigfoot, real quick, because I know you've got some things that you wanted to say before you booked, and then Bryce, and then Rose.
Well, I guess I used to or I guess what I said earlier is pretty much how I feel about it, which is that this man is the guy who converted me to anarchist, and it makes me really sad to see somebody I really like the way I think it was it Chris who said about jumping the shark. I can't remember. Was that you, Chris?
It was.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really good way to describe it, because it's just so saddening to see somebody who was such a passionate and radical advocate for liberty in his youth just fall into this absolute lack of empathy for the state's biggest victims, which are the people who've been literally forced out of the market due to state pressure and state control of literally everything about life. Like, half of the problem of the homelessness, I honestly feel, is the lack of a bottom door on the market, which is to say, the lack of way for somebody to enter the market who has no starting capital and only has starting skills and knowledge.
Yes.
Like, in the past, we used to have that in the form of peddling and cooking and other forms of, hey man, I can just do what you need. I know how to do it. I don't need to prove it. As long as you believe me and I can actually provide, then is what it is. All of that's been basically completely eradicated through licensure and illegalities and all sorts of shit like that, which just makes it impossible for them to get into the market in any other way other than selling their souls to horrible jobs or doing crimes that'll just put them in prison anyway.
No entry, no upward mobility, preloaded by poverty and bad social conditions, no schools, food deserts, fucking, like, just poverty causes a significant amount of these things, and poverty is always exacerbated by white-collar crime and the state itself.
Yeah. But anyway, I am literally Bigfoot, otherwise known as the Anarcho-Appalachian, and like I said at the beginning, if you guys want to read the first article that I put on Anarch Unity, sorry, Jesus.
You're tired. It's
about iconoclastic thinking, basically taking the blinders off of the way we see things and describing them as they are in actual fact, as opposed to with the words that we are used to describing them with, as a way to reveal tyranny in everyday life.
Yes.
I had a great time. Hope you guys have a good rest of your discussion.
Yeah,
Good
we
night,
got
guys.
like 20 minutes left. Be well. Bryce.
Alright, so this is actually easily the most indefensible plank that is discussed in the Paleo strategy. Homelessness and, or to use the exact terms, bums and vagrants. Yes, that's an issue. Libertarianism actually has a solution to that issue, though, and I wish the Libertarian Party would adopt more of this messaging to incorporate in with the Austrian econ theory, and that's fucking mutualism. Mutualism literally solves that whole issue right there.
Yeah, it does.
And the fact that you would turn to cops instead is incredibly infuriating.
It's such a selling out of basic principles.
Not only turn to cops, but also a lot of the cuck bitch fucking pieces of shit that like this plank and a bunch of the other ones here. Those people are oftentimes the kinds of piece of shit slags that are being like, I suck the right so hard, I'm gonna say that there's no such thing as a left libertarian. Eat shit, bitch. Choke on it.
Well, they just don't understand what that even is. They're like, that's an oxymoron. No, you idiot. Learn your roots.
Yes.
It's frustrating.
Chris.
I wanted to bring up, building codes and housing regulations and all other kinds of stuff that do more to increase homelessness. Also, there are a lot of kids that are homeless that aren't allowed to work.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
They would, they could certainly do jobs that would be better than what they usually end up doing, which is something that's illegal. There are a lot of barriers out there. When I go to Mexico, I'm always amazed at all the micro businesses I see. I mean, people start a business in Mexico for maybe the equivalent of $1,000 or $2,000. And you don't seem to be able to, you don't see that here in America nearly as much.
Not anymore. Used to be a thing.
You might get,
Because you literally can't.
Yes, it's illegal now.
Well-
You have to get a high-priced degree.
Yeah, one guy had a little place where he just made keys for people. That's all he did. All he had to do was go buy a key making machine, and he was in business. I don't know if these were full-time businesses, but they were all businesses, and it seems like Mexicans are much more into that than Americans are. I think there's a lot of, of course, you might see restaurants that were the size of a 2-car garage, but yeah, so it's not a perfect. There's a lot of things that we do. It's kind of embarrassing that we have so many people homeless in this country. I hope that we, and it seems like there should be some way to, Austin has this one place called Mobile Loaves and Fishes, and they actually are trying to get people out of that awful cycle and give them small places to live. And they've got a place where they work on cars and other things like that. And of course, they have their AA meetings. I mean, we really have a lot of people. So many people in America are just thrown away, and that just doesn't. It doesn't benefit us. It's getting worse. I tell people in Argentina that I have more hope for their country than our country, and they're just scratching their heads, and I just. We've got so many people who are addicted to drugs, or we've got people who are on permanent psychoactive drugs prescribed by a doctor.
Oh, God. Yeah, don't even get me started on that shit.
Life expectancy has been going down since 2014.
Yeah. You have to get people something to live for. Even taking people off the street is only the first step. They have to have something to live for, or they're just going to revert back to their old habits. And people don't have anything to live for now because...
Rose, I am not broke by any means. I mean, I my financial situation is set, but I'm 53. I'm never married with no kids. What do I have to live for?
Right.
Really, I mean, I'm not going to end up homeless on the streets, or at least I'm very far from that. But it's, People need family. They need people that care about them. They need, it's like if you had a real crisis, who would be there for you? It's.
And that the economy doesn't help that, because if they've got if they've got no personal support structure and they don't even have $400 for an emergency, then
it's awful knowing that one missed paycheck and you could lose everything.
Yeah.
And there's no one who's going to help you. If you get sick and can't work and you're paid by the hour and you're out of sick time, so then you won't be able to pay your rent month, then you risk being evicted. Then without a stable place to live or a means of transport, you won't be able to keep your job at all. So it snowballs.
Yeah, hella. The other week, I'm basically broke. The other week, I fucking broke my phone accidentally and freaked out because if I don't have a phone, I can't get work. If I can't get work, I can't make expenses. I'm gonna be I'm always a breath away from fucking extreme catastrophe. If anybody wants to help a broke bum, feel free to post or put your Patreon fucking. So there's that sort of shit, and then there's I'm not even in the worst situation, fucking. It's one of those things and the way society is set up, nepotism and a bunch of other stuff, it's really hard to break into the market if you're young, and it's also hard to break into the market if you didn't break into the market when you were young, because you didn't get that nepotism hire into a decent job, and so you didn't get the leg up that other people had, and so you didn't get the sort of advantage in that regard. You didn't get your proverbial 40 acres, and so when you don't get that baseline structural foundational I got this, maybe you don't got this. Also,
yeah, I mean, my family struggles, but I know I'm still one of the lucky ones in a lot of regards. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go for it.
Yeah, I'm lucky too.
Yeah, I mean, we all have it pretty good. We've got a roof over our heads.
Yes.
We've got heating. We've got air conditioning. We've got clean running water. So
I get to go
yeah.
eat food
Yeah.
like in the other room, like that's just there, and I get to cook it
yeah,
using
there's
magic
plenty of
boxes.
food.
Go
Yeah.
go to Peru
Too
if you wanna
much
see
food is a
what
bigger
it's like.
issue in this country than too little food. So yeah, we're not going to starve to death.
Yeah, that's one thing. A lot of the poor people are fat.
Yeah.
And like the food waste thing is a whole nother we should have an entire episode stream on how to reduce waste. I think that'd be a good stream. And like one of the ways,
Yeah.
like I recently made yet another batch of bone broth, and I'm going to go drink me some bones after this call is over. And so
Right.
yeah, fucking and it,
Yeah.
you know, it fits the aesthetic. So, but
Yeah. Even though I've left the church long ago, being raised Catholic, that's one thing I always got is it was a sin to throw food away.
eh. Pat Buchanan is our ideal candidate. He's highly intelligent. He is deeply principled. He is known and loved by millions of Americans. He has a great deal of experience in politics, though not in running. Fucking continued page 4, column 3. Hold on a second.
I can read that. I've got it separated out already out of the PDF.
Okay, yeah, go for it, because this was sent by Reinhold.
So,
So he's a superb public speaker, and his personally is a remarkable blend of reason and passion, which enables him to rouse the masses as no one else has done in our lifetime. He's paleo through and through. He stands for America first and for an older and finer America, an America with liberty and individual responsibility of a culture permeated by sound religious values and marked by a happy and optimistic view of mankind and of the universe. He speaks to the best of every American, and he has the capacity to get them to listen. He speaks to the best hope of bringing back that kind of America. And we talk a lot about Rothbard when he started out was more kind of trying to work with the left and everything like that. But you got to understand something, that when he made his turn here to embrace out to Pat Buchanan, he said that he'd always been, when he was younger, he'd always been old right. And he writes in this article that, or he gave a speech in January of '92, and he says, the second celebration of mine personally, my own return home to the right wing after 35 years in the public wilderness. Like a 19th century romantic hero, I am confident I'm returning home with a higher level than when I departed. He's stating that all of that time that, you know, he's bringing people to anarchism and he's working with the left and he's big in the libertarian movement, he was still in his heart old right wing, and this was him returning home to his real views.
but that old right that he originally felt at home with no longer existed. Like, yeah,
No, he wanted to bring it back.
maybe
That's
there
the
was
point.
a point. Yeah, okay, maybe there was a
And
time in the
that's
country when the right was
There was never a
fiscally
time in the country where this time existed. It's a golden age,
Yeah,
but they always felt that it used to be better. And that's kind of the basics of a lot of the right-wing populism, is this romanticized idea of a time when things were better, and it's so bad now. All the progression that we've had and all the liberation
Right.
and everything else we talk about, it's gotten crazy. We need to return back to a simpler time, an America first, a right-wing religious populism. And that's what's getting kind of sucked into the right-wing side of libertarianism now, is that same mentality. You hear people like Clint Russell talking about America first, and all these people talking about America first. America first was a movement from the 1930s that was very fascist,
Yes.
and very much in support of Hitler, right? And it was using the same dialogue that we're hearing now from the Trump MAGA movement and from the right-wing movement on the libertarian side. It's the same
Thing.
populist right-wing mentality.
what, that we need a libertarian nationalist alliance?
I disagree. I don't believe that all the America First people were fascists. I think they sincerely wanted to keep America out of the war.
Yeah,
That's how it works, though. That's how populism works. You have the leadership, the people who are pushing that, using the verbiage that riles up the populist sentiment, but they're the ones who are reaching out and wanting that return to a romanticized past that never existed.
Yep, like David Duke.
Maybe so.
Because I don't believe all of Trump's supporters, all the red hat wearing MAGA people, they're not fascist. They think that they're doing what's best for America because they've been sold a bill of goods. I believe that the people who are running Trump's advisory council, Stephen Miller, those types of people, those are fascists through and through.
Yeah.
And I believe that there's fascists sitting over in LPNH. And the people who were on the podcast last night, on Timcast last night, those were fascists.
Well,
And if you go and look at the summary that Hody put together of the things they talked about last night, Hody said he had to take a shower after.
One piece of pushback, one piece of pushback for the podcast. Karen was 100% disagreeing with like 90% of their stuff.
Yes,
so.
I do agree that Karen was pushing back when she could, but she wasn't getting much. She wasn't getting much help from Tim and the other people who were decidedly on the other side.
Yeah.
I may have my disagreements with Rectenwald and Kaufman, but I don't believe they're fascists. And again, a lot of the people.
I don't think Rectenwald is, but I mean, Jeremy.
I don't know about Rectenwald.
Over this quite a bit.
If you're saying that the people,
Jeremy, 100%.
If you're saying that the people who wanted to keep us out of World War II are fascists, then you're calling George Washington and Thomas Jefferson fascists too.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't agree with their sentiment on that. I don't think that they would have won us out of World War II. I think there comes a time, we don't have time to get into this. I agree with that. We don't have time to get into this. I have a whole thing that I can go on that. But like I'm trying to say is that there are people who are using this to rile sentiment, right? That's what I'm saying. It's just like I don't think all the people who were supportive of America First at the time. But if you go look back at what the different the flags they were waving and the things they were saying, it was very much fascism, right? That's the epitome of fascism. But that's the point of fascism, is that you don't have to be fascist to be in a fascist movement. You're used to do that,
and of course, you're
manipulated.
And of course, the people
I'm just very careful how I use the term.
So I can't legitimately oppose America getting involved in some foreign war.
That's not what he said. What he's saying is that the people who were in charge of the movements that were using America First as sloganeering were not saying America First because they were opposed to all war. They were saying America First because they wanted America to be the prime, to get primacy in decision making, and also the culture of America to be considered exceptional and allowed to do what it does. A lot of the people in America First movements historically have been very chiefly connected to racist sentiment, to sentiment that was mirroring or in some cases endorsing Hitler. And in a lot of ways, the people connected to America First mentalities were actively, materially involved in the Nazi regime because they saw fellow travelers in the Germany First mentality of Hitler. To
also say, remember that Hitler took a lot of inspiration from what the second KKK in the United States was doing with their anti-immigration policies and other policies that they were trying to put in place then to use to develop what they started doing. Because really, the second KKK that came around in the 1920s was one of the first fascist movements that existed.
Yes.
It just isn't called that today.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and he directly visited America and thanked Americans for helping him understand better what must be done. This is in public speeches. This is in his private correspondences. He was and not just that, but American businesses had colluded for a long time with the government of Nazi Germany, and directly were supportive of those. And those businesses loved the America First rhetoric and the rhetoric of we've got to return back to a previous time when things were better. And those people were oftentimes directly affiliated with this mentality. It's not that the people who it's not like everybody saying America First was a terrible person. It's not like the people saying America First because they opposed war were inherently bad people. But a significant amount of them were being taken along for a ride, and the driver of that car was Henry Ford, who hated the Jews, or some similar
It's a
thing.
pipeline too.
Yeah.
Right. You get the people in with, hey, we shouldn't be going in and involving ourselves in these foreign wars. Oh, and we shouldn't be allowing this to happen, and this culture is the problem, and this.
Yeah.
And you start integrating all of that into that same movement, and that's where people get sucked in. And I think it's what happens a lot of time. What's happening right now a lot on the right libertarian side is that we're anti-war, but then you get caught up into the other things that are being brought up in that section, and it becomes a pipeline. The alt-right pipeline exists. And I've seen people go down it.
It's not as common as our detractors pretend, but it does exist. Like, for example, with, like, to reference current issues, like with Israel, you can be anti-Israel for the right reasons, or you can be anti-Israel for the wrong reasons. And I have seen some libertarians fall down the pipeline of being anti-Israel for the wrong reasons. I will say that much.
Jacob Winograd, who I'm probably talking to on this 27th, he says Biblical Anarchy on Twitter. Y'all, like, channel followers, blah blah, have seen him.
Yeah, he's on my friends list.
Yeah, you can all follow. You can all go to look at his YouTube, Christian Biblical Anarchy podcast, and you'll find an appearance of mine that I'm still proud to say did better than the Rechtenwald appearance. He did this tweet today, saying some people oppose war because they have principles. Others oppose some wars only because they hate Jews. Others claim to hate war but fall for government propaganda regarding politics and culture. These latter two groups are an albatross around the anti-war movement's neck. So, that's basically the point.
Well, I guess the most word I can say is that I'm non-interventionist. I don't believe that America should be involved, and by getting involved, we just harm ourselves and gain nothing.
Sure.
If you look, do you see what's on my Facebook profile right now?
I saw like maybe a flag of England, maybe, or
no, that's the flag of, well, as I prefer to call it, Saccart Velo, but we call it Georgia, because they believe that their country is being slowly infiltrated and gradually taken over by Russia, and they said we will never be a part of Russia. Yeah. I visited that country, and I've told those people, would I go fight for? Give me a rifle, I probably would go fight for you. I'm not gonna demand that my neighbor go fight for them, though, and I'm not gonna say that this war should be fought in my town. But I love those people. It was a great, wonderful country, wonderful people. I would love, and I'd love to go back again.
Yeah, makes sense.
And, it's a little country,
but I do.
And people against the added enemy. And one thing I've told them also, I said, you should all have 2 pistols, 1 rifle, and 50 rounds for each weapon. Every single one of you should have that.
Yeah.
And not to mention, I also think they should get nuclear weapons if they're that threatened by Russia. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Well, Ukraine did, and we made an agreement to convince them to give them up in order for Russia not to invade them. And then we just said, we backed out of that deal. So
yeah,
we're trying to back out of that
use them
deal.
all as cannon fodder for our proxy war.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a proxy war. Although
I disagree with that, but
although there's also,
I think it's no different than Georgia.
Well, okay, so
what happened years?
Here's the middle ground between all.
Well,
go for it. Go for it.
I was going to say one thing about Thomas Jefferson and George Washington is that I don't think that they would have a problem with helping out another country who's being completely overrun by an aggressor, and they had no problem asking for help from other countries in our wars.
I think they would have objected to creating the conditions that led to this supposed situation where another country was being overrun by an aggressor, and then pretending that they had to go help this country.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that. That's a lot of propaganda.
We will have
disagree with that.
We will have a full Ukraine stream at some point, potentially more than one, and we can really dive down into the issues and get Zelensky with it. But like we're at around 2 hours, so I'm gonna just middle ground this here in a way that I have to bring this up contractually obligated by the by my bloodline. Fucking, you want an example of a president which did not have to resort to America First like propaganda, who was like an example of an older right winger who was like very like well spoken on matters of progress and not a fascist piece of shit. Harding. Harding was all about holding anti-war, pro-peace conferences. He kept things stable. He kept people on board with actual global truces and understandings between nations. He slashed regulations in the form of all of the stuff that like libertarians jack off about but never accomplish. He was big on like reducing inflation and helping enable businesses. And while he was doing all of that, he was pissing off sexists and racists by saying women shouldn't be disenfranchised and black people should be able to vote. But he didn't even just say it that way. He also he very specifically responded to questions in this regard. He very specifically responded to questions in this regard by saying that if somebody is fit to vote, then they should be able to, and if they aren't, they should not, implying that there were some white people that might not even be fit to vote by the standards that they were holding black people to. So he was very much like a libertarian asshole, and the Harding tradition stretching back to the beginning of the century, and people don't put enough fucking respect on his name. So as the resident Harding, I've gotta say something there, and that's, I think, relatively good middle ground.
And you're descended from him, aren't
I
also,
think he's a loose relative is the thing. If I understand correctly,
this
it's
whole
like
stream has just been one big advertisement for you to sell your services, is what you're saying?
It would be funny if people gave me enough money that I could run for president, but I don't think that's gonna happen. So we'll see. Anyway, Chris.
Also, while he was only president for 2 years, he happened to appoint 4 Supreme Court justices, 2 of whom were very much anti-New Deal, and I think that's one reason, the biggest reason why historians really hate him. He cut the government. I mean, Coolidge did to a certain example too, although that was also unfortunately a time when there was very much nativism, like the Immigration Act and crap like that, But yeah, it was there were a lot of good things going on, and of course we unfortunately still had the ridiculous holy experiment known as alcohol prohibition. But yeah, there were a lot of good things that came out of the Harding era. Also doing nothing in response to a depression which ended in 6 months.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The depression you've never heard of, the thing that Mises Institute and Foundation for Economic Education can all agree on. Kareem, we are wrapping soon.
1991.
Yeah. Kareem, we are wrapping soon, and you have said barely any words. I see your R. That's it. Are you going to say any words, or are we going to wrap while you're just awkwardly not there?
He's trying to figure out what today's political ideology is.
Yeah, right? All right, well, in general...
I'm just making fun of him for changing political ideologies every single day.
In general, I think this went relatively well, and I thank everybody who showed up, and we will be doing more of this relatively soon. Oh, Kareem has unmuted. You can also enable your camera if you choose.
He's cutting out.
My laptop has been being weird, so just been listening. But yeah, follow me on Twitter, Kareem6633. I'm an ANCAP man and an ANCAP stan. I'm an ego man and ego stan.
Yeah, there we go.
Please do not be a Sterner bro, okay? I cannot stand Sterner bros. I can tolerate most ideologies, but Sterner bros, I draw the line at them.
So I guess that would be his outro. We'll move to Bryce. Closing statements. You can say as much as you want about what was discussed today. Kareem, though, could you mute when, because you got the echo going on. Yeah. Bryce. Unless Bryce passed out or something. You there, Bryce? We need cheese. All right, well, Dennis.
Yeah, I guess you can follow me on Reinhold.org, where a lot of my old writing is, and Reinhold on Twitter, Reinhold on Facebook, Reinhold everywhere you can find me.
My internet fucked up for a second. Chris.
Yes, Chris Baker. My show is Fountainhead Forum on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute. I just uploaded a show about where we talked about libertarian novelists and movies and just all these creative people, all these great authors, not just Ayn Rand. We even talked about Mark Twain and Harriet Beecher Stowe, and hopefully I'm also in the process of editing a 3-hour show about the clusterfuck that is the objectivist movement right now. It's a real tragedy, but I'm having issues with my software, but I'll see what I can do with that. But yes, it should be fun.
Well, in your fiction episode, did you go over the Sonic comics?
We didn't touch comics. We mostly just stuck with movies and books and occasional TV shows. We didn't really get into comics.
No comics, but if you don't do comics, you can't do the libertarian / anarchist overtures of Punisher or V for Vendetta or.
We did talk about V for Vendetta. I had a whole show with Jack Lloyd once too, so we talked about comics with him.
Cool.
And I talked about another guy named Bob Palin who knew people like Stan Lee. So we have talked about comics, but this was mostly just fiction, science fiction novels. And we talked about Mark Twain and things like that too. It's been fun.
A little bit of Heinlein, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely mentioned Heinlein, L. Neil Smith.
Yeah, I'm working my way through Plutocracy right now, which is a graphic novel about the corporation / government that takes over the world in the future. So it's a cynical, angry book, and it's got this on the front cover. So obviously, this was a book I chose to pick up for my free birthday book at page 42 in Spokane, Washington. Everybody should go there.
And where would I get a copy if I don't live in Spokane, Washington?
Oh, this is apparently a very common book. You could get this anywhere. A Libris is what I would recommend probably, because A Libris is like cheap used books. So yeah, I'll send you a monetized link to A Libris because I'm sleazy.
Well, as long as you're blatant about it, I can respect that.
Yeah. Bryce.
Again, yes.
Sorry, what? Oh, I thought you had something about it, Chris. If not, Bryce. Bryce has left us. He is no longer.
Bryce is gone now.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, with all that being said, don't listen to the populist right. Don't listen to the authoritarians. You know where to find me, and you know that my primary goal in all of this is to smash the fucking state. And the only way we can do that is if we unite with the people on the ground. If we unite with like our brothers and sisters and theysters where they are, and like stop this useless division that the rich and powerful like to use to keep us fighting each other, so that we're never actually stopping them and their white-collar crimes, so that we're never actually doing anything about the actual overarching systems and structures, so that we can never do anything against them. As long as we keep pitted against each other in these ways, with these mechanisms, we'll never be able to do anything about their power. We'll never be able to stop their systems. So the Paleo strategy is dead on arrival as far as I'm concerned. There will be more streams about it because we just went over one plank today, basically. Like, in the end run of it, like, we got to the next plank. That's the progress we've made. So we will be doing more of this at some point. But with all that being said, unite with your fellow person. What?
How many planks are there?
There are 2 more, I think. I can check. I can check right now before we move forward. But I believe there are 2 more planks, if I understand correctly. let me click into my document here, and fucking yeah. So we've got 6, 7, and 8. Oh, and also after the planks, we've got the whole culture surrounding that, which we can sort of pick away at. Which this document, the actual paleo strategy proposition, it has so much more in it. There's so much that needs to be unpacked, as the social media people say these days. But with all that being said, we need all hands on motherfucking deck. This is not a game. It's an emergency. They're robbing even more of our liberties. They are destroying even more of the world. They are giving us ever more reasons to unite with our people on the ground and smash the fucking state.